Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Irreverent Therapists with me, Marilyn Bradford, and my cohort, wrong way, Pam Hodling.
Hello.
And the topic this time is dealing with toxic people. Are you an optimist? Do you believe that all people are basically good underneath it all? And have you ever been blindsided by someone's toxic behavior? Maybe you had a good friend and found out they'd been trashing you behind your back. Or maybe a colleague you thought was you had a good relationship with took credit for your work. These events can be bewildering and make us question ourselves and our sanity sometimes. Unfortunately, toxic people do exist, but the good news is that there are two tools, sorry, I've got a little morning voice here, to help you identify them sooner and not become their victims. Join us for some tips and tools for identifying and dealing with toxic people. Ta-da!
I've never met any toxic people, have you?
Oh, no, not at all. I think one example, well, go ahead, Pam.
No, I was going to say, Marilyn, tell me about one of your toxic people.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about a couple of them. One of them was someone that I thought was a friend, and we did some things together, and I knew she was kind of entitled, but I didn't have a sense of how really over-the-top toxic she was. And we were having lunch one day, and I said, well, I think I was musing. I think I'm going to call so-and-so and talk with them about the situation. And she said, I'll get back with you on that, whether or not that's a good idea. And then she went on to make several comments like that. I'll let you know. Well, yeah, I get that's a good thing for you. As if she knew more about me than I did. She was incredibly disempowering. And I looked back over our time together and I could see some other instances of that. But I didn't even allow that to enter my kind of psyche because she had done some things for me. She'd organized some things for me. So that was one example. Another example was just an out narcissist. And I was aware that she was always talking about herself and about her boyfriends. Having a boyfriend was a big deal. And it really came to a head when we met for lunch. I'd been busy for a couple of weeks and she's talking about, and then, well, Glenn did this. And can you believe Glenn did that? And there was a pause and I said, hey, I just facilitated 10 days of classes in 13 days and it was really fun. And she said, I know you like that stuff. And then you know what? Glenn called his mother again to talk about a soup recipe. I'm not even in the computation of this equation. But, sometimes the light just has to go off.
Yeah.
And there are people who are so blatantly toxic, tell lie after lie after lie, or are always demeaning, always gaslighting. But some of this more subtle stuff, it doesn't do you any good to make all the rationalizations and justifications about it. Well, I know they had a hard childhood. So what? Plenty of people with hard childhoods, difficult childhoods, like Dr. Dane here, turn out to be amazing, empowering people. Mm-hmm. So there's no excuse for toxic behavior. That's my take on it.
And I think there's so many different kinds of ways that people can show up as toxic. But I think a lot of it has to do, like when I look in my life at the people I've known who I would call toxic, there's a lot of judgment involved. There was one person that I had to spend a lot of time with, and basically, she knew exactly how things were supposed to be and how everyone should be. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't living up to that, then you were wrong.
Right.
And she would use anything you gave her, she would use as a weapon. So, wow. If you were like, I'd be like, I'll try to explain to her, what's going on for me, or share something about my life. And the next thing I knew, it was being turned into another reason why I was wrong and everything. So it's, but there's the people who are just judging you constantly. There's people who, like you mentioned, are actually lying to you and misleading you or trying to disempower you. But there's, let me ask you this, Marilyn, to you, what is toxic? Like when we say toxic people, it's, a
What I
toxin
think of is, this is bizarre, but the image that came up was acid that was burning away at a substance.
Yep.
I think that's what it is. These people are burning away at your very being.
Yes.
At your sense of self, at your, I'm okay. It's like, I'm going to make you wrong. I'm going to show you how superior I am to you. I'm going to completely ignore you. And you are just there to be witness to my life.
To gratify my greatness.
Exactly.
Well, and with that, I love that image of the acid eating away, and what you said about it's, they're eating away at your being, because you might be wondering, how do I know who in my life is toxic?
Yeah.
Well, who are the people that when you're around them, you're drained of energy?
Yes.
That being around them, you go into doubt about you and what you're doing, and you feel like you're not enough, and they're reinforcing all that.
Yes.
It's people who, when you're around them, you could be in a great mood and having a great time and feel like you can actually do things and create things. And then you're with them and you realize what a pile of shit you are. Like those,
yes.
I'd say that's like your barometer, because there's the people who you choose to have in your life, and being them in your life creates greater for both of you. You're in their life creates greater for both of you.
Yes.
And, those are the people who nurture you and you nurture them and you contribute to each other, and then it's a very different thing when you're with someone and you become less because you're with them.
Because you're with them. And I do want to say one thing. Children are basically born egocentric. They just are. They have to be the center of the universe. And sometimes you'll find kids who seem to be kind of toxic. They want to be the center of attention. But they can grow out of it. And with good parenting or a teacher or whomever, they can be made aware that there are other people in the world besides you. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Because when you're an infant and a toddler and stuff, that having it all be about you is survival.
Exactly. Exactly.
But when you're 10, then it's just not, it's a different thing.
Yeah, you can't take all the toys for yourself and hit Johnny in the head with one of them, that kind of thing. But that is the behavior that some people choose to never grow out of. And these are not people you desire to have in your life. With both of these people, I didn't have to have them in my life. They weren't family. They weren't part of my work, really. And what I did basically was ghost them. Not in a way, but they just, all of a sudden, I just didn't respond. Or they said, hey, can you meet for lunch tomorrow? Or, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Or I'm really busy. I have other plans. That's basically what I did with both of them. Yeah. And then they just quit asking. But it can be more complicated if it's a person you have to be around, or if it's a family member, or if it's someone in your work circle. Or so what tools do you suggest, Pam?
Well, having had an extended family member I married the family I married into had someone who was very challenging for both my husband and I to be related to. And I think what really helped is, first of all, acknowledging what's actually going on.
Oh, good point.
So, when we acknowledge that this is not a person that we can have the kind of relationship with that we'd like to, they're not capable of that.
Or don't choose it.
Or don't choose it. What can we have? And so then to focus on that. So, like when I realized, it's the same person I was referring to before, when I realized that if I actually shared anything about myself, it was a weapon. I was giving her a weapon. One of my friends said, well, don't talk about that. Talk about, go do things together. And then you talk about the things you're doing and you talk about what you have done. And, and don't try to have that meaningful relationship with her.
Right.
So that really helped, just acknowledging this is what is, and
Yeah.
this is the parameters within which, we have to function. Another thing is, my husband and I realized that we had to be very clear with each other about what we were going to do with regards to her, because it was very easy to get this three-way embroilment going. And again, once we recognized that, then we didn't fall into that trap anymore. So by acknowledging what is, not being in judgment of her, we both were practicing presence and allowance, and just being with what is. And honestly, the going to access consciousness classes and getting those tools completely changed it for me, because in the moment I could just be like, wow, this is really interesting what she's choosing. I'm going to choose something different.
Yes.
And so, kind of all of that made it possible to have this person who was a constant presence in our lives be actually someone we could enjoy, and within the parameters of what worked.
Yes.
So I'd say that too. Look for what works.
Yeah. And also, I mean, one of the, like what you said, oh, she's choosing that whole not buying into their universe, not making anyone greater than you. That's a really big thing, because that's what toxic people want to do. They want to make themselves greater than you. And they want to make sure that you stay in that one down position, even when you're clearly, I don't know, smarter than they are, nicer than they are, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
My mother was a great example of this. She used to say things like, well, I only criticize you so you know what you need to improve. So she was really addicted to criticism. But she would also, I grew up in a very prestigious academic town where my father was a professor. And, like 98% of the high school went to, what mattered was what college you got into. Seriously, it wasn't how much money you had or anything like that. It was, where are you going to college?
Or who you are.
Yeah. Well, my mother was, you don't need to go to college, Marilyn. You can be a secretary like I was. And even then, I'm like, that's really weird. But the point of all of this was, and I'm not making myself a victim, because I wasn't, I chose this. However, what I became aware of later was, if you're used to that treatment growing up, it's easy to overlook it or expect it when you're an adult.
Yeah.
So you really have to, without blame or anything like that, take a look at your childhood. Did you have toxic people growing up, and have you made that normal or okay? Or maybe you even copied it at some point, because we do tend to copy our family's behavior if we don't go, whoa. So, just be aware without judgment of what toxic behavior may have existed in your childhood, and whatever that brought up or what that created.
Yep. And find your own path for then transforming that into something different. Exactly. And, when you were talking, what it made me think of is that person is going to be how they are.
Yes.
Right? You're not, most of us who were in had close encounters with toxic people did a lot of trying to alter us to help mediate that toxicity. Right. And so what I find really helpful is when I acknowledge, wow, this person is honestly just being a CCFB. That then basically they can be doing what they're doing, and I can just be me.
Yes.
And be like, wow, they're doing that, but I don't have to fight it. I used to try to fight it, like, oh, if I could only get her to see just how wrong she is.
She has no interest in that.
No judgment on my part with that. Or if I could just get her to change, then life would be easier. And when I finally was like, no, she's being her, and I can just let her be her, but that I can change how I am with it. And
Yes.
so I started doing all kinds of things to not lose me in that relationship,
Right.
and to that she could kind of do whatever she was doing and I was fine.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
I didn't have to fight it. And in fact, not fighting it actually helps, because there's to not fight isn't being a doormat. It's
No.
actually just choosing to be.
Yes. And sometimes you can even acknowledge stuff. Oh, did you mean to be that mean in your last comment? I mean, and there's a whole, we don't have time to get into this today, but there's a whole thing on gaslighting. When someone's gaslighting you, one of the ways to make it stop is to gaslight them back. But that's a whole different
Well,
ballgame.
and Marilyn has a whole class on gaslighting.
Gaslight, I do.
Well, and the one thing we didn't mention, which I just wanted to point out from the description you wrote, Marilyn, is, there's times where there's somebody who you're going along and you think they're your friend, or you think you have a great relationship, or you get along well at work, and suddenly it changes.
Yeah.
And they're not showing up the way, in that same way. And the one thing I found super helpful with that is, we kind of expect and project. If we're friends, that means that we have each other's backs, or, and first of all, what friendship means to me and what it means to you could be completely different.
Yes.
But we tend to kind of function in this little world, this little universe of what we think is going on, rather than being truly present with what is.
Yes. And I just wanted to add something, because that brought up something for me, Pam. Another thing you can do is to ask, what is this person's hidden agenda?
Yeah.
Or what is this person's agenda? Because people can appear to be really nice and helpful. Oh, they want me to see them as a wonderful person and promote them, or they want me to go out of my way, even if I'm diminishing them, so ask, and you can sometimes go, wow, this is just a really cool person who's happy to be in the world, creating greater for everybody, including themselves, but not disincluding you. I don't think that's a word, but that's okay.
You can make up a word.
I can make up a word.
Yeah. And I think that, including you is a big part, because so often we're trying to take care of everybody, or we're, making sure, things are smooth for everybody. Like we all have our different ways of being in the world, but if you include you and everyone, and you're present with all of it, and you ask questions, and you're willing to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, you can enjoy the person who's also toxic sometimes, because you're willing to see it for what it is. And you don't have to be like, oh, I'm only going to have people who aren't toxic in my life. It's like, you might want a toxic person as your lawyer if you're getting sued. They could be a very good asset, but you might not want to be married to them.
Exactly. So, no, that's a very good point. Sometimes you want the white shark on your side.
Yeah. But when you're willing to be present with what is, you can see it for what it is and choose.
Yes.
And know, yes, I'm going out to lunch with someone who's likely to stab me in the back, but we have really great conversations. So I'm going to enjoy it for what it is.
Yes. Or they may be actually, in order to reel me in, they may be making a contribution to my business.
Yeah.
How do I use this to my advantage?
Yeah. Yep.
So
anyway, I think that's a good place to cue the music.
I do too. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everybody.